Why did the Jews hate the Samaritans so much? Why was the word Samaritan once spoken almost like an insult among the Jewish people? And why would Jesus shock an entire audience by making a Samaritan the hero of one of his most famous parables? Let's picture a dusty, lonely road somewhere between Jerusalem and Jericho. A man lies beaten, robbed, and left for dead. Two different respected religious figures see him and pass by on the other side. Then a third traveler appears. He is a Samaritan. He stops, tends to the man's wounds, places him on his own animal, and pays for his care. Today we know this as the parable of the Good Samaritan, a story so famous that its meaning can seem obvious. But to the people hearing Jesus tell it for the very first time, this story was utterly shocking. Why? Because in the first century, Jews and Samaritans deeply despised one another. To understand why, we must travel back in time, long before that lonely road became the setting of this unforgettable parable. So who were the Samaritans? Their story begins with a catastrophic event in 722 BC. The mighty Assyrian Empire conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, deporting much of its population and resettling the land with foreigners. The Old Testament tells us that these new settlers intermarried with the Israelites who were left behind. This mixing of peoples and cultures was the first seed of division. The people of the southern kingdom, Judah, saw those in the north, now called Samaria, as having diluted their pure Israelite bloodline and religious heritage. The Samaritans, however, saw it differently. They believed they were the true descendants of the northern Israelite tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. They saw themselves as the direct heirs of Jacob and Joseph, who had faithfully preserved the ancient traditions on their ancestral land. This fundamental disagreement over identity, who were the true heirs of Israel, created a chasm that would only widen over the centuries. This identity crisis led directly to a profound religious schism. The central point of worship for the Jews was the temple in Jerusalem, built on Mount Zion. This was for them the one and only place God had chosen for sacrifice and worship. The Samaritans, however, rejected the authority of Jerusalem. They built their own temple on their own sacred mountain, Mount Gerizim. They claimed Gerizim, not Zion, was the holy site designated by Moses. This wasn't just a minor disagreement over real estate. It was a direct challenge to the very heart of Jewish religious life. Furthermore, while both groups revered the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, their versions differed. The Samaritan Pentateuch identifies Mount Gerizim as the chosen place of worship. For the Jews, this was heresy. For the Samaritans, it was the truth. This rivalry over sacred texts and sacred space created a spiritual wall between them, fortified by strict concepts of purity. Each group viewed the other as ritually unclean, making any shared worship or community life impossible. These deep-seated religious and ethnic tensions inevitably boiled over into historical conflict. One major flashpoint occurred in the 6th century BC, after the Babylonian exile passed. When the Jews returned to Jerusalem to rebuild their temple, the Samaritans offered to help. But Zerubbabel, the Jewish governor, flatly rejected their offer. He declared that these foreigners had no part in building a house for the God of Israel. This public, humiliating rejection cemented the Samaritan status as outsiders. The bitterness festered for centuries, culminating in a brutal act of violence. In 128 BC, the Jewish Hasmonean king, John Hyrcanus, marched his army north, conquered Samaria, and utterly destroyed the Samaritan temple on Mount Gerizim. Imagine the modern equivalent of one religious group demolishing another's most sacred cathedral. It was an act of desecration designed to erase their rival's identity, and it left a scar of hatred that would never fully heal. From that point on, any chance of reconciliation was gone. The relationship was now defined by conquest, destruction, and a legacy of unforgivable historical trauma. By the 1st century, the time of Jesus, this ancient animosity had curdled into total social and cultural isolation. The hatred was a part of daily life. Jews traveling between Galilee in the north and Judea in the south would often take a longer, more difficult route through the Jordan Valley just to avoid setting foot in Samaria. To them, the land and its people were contaminated. Contact was to be avoided at all costs. Rabbinic laws were put in place that formalized this segregation. Samaritans were legally classified alongside Gentiles. A Jew could not eat food prepared by a Samaritan, drink from a vessel they had touched, or accept their testimony in a court of law. This wasn't just prejudice. It was a system of apartheid, built on centuries of religious disagreement and historical violence. The Samaritan woman at the well was shocked that Jesus, a Jew, would even speak to her, let alone ask for a drink from her jar. Her surprise reveals just how high and impenetrable the barrier between their peoples had become. So when Jesus told the story of the Good Samaritan, he wasn't just telling a nice tale about kindness. He was deliberately choosing the most despised figure imaginable, a heretical, half-breed enemy, and making him the hero. He was forcing his audience to confront a millennium of hatred, a wall built from ethnic pride, religious dogma, historical grudges, and social segregation. The parable's power comes from this context. It suggests that true neighborliness, true righteousness, transcends all the barriers we build. It's a radical call to see the humanity in our worst enemy. Understanding this deep-seated historical conflict allows us to appreciate the true weight of that story and its timeless message about breaking down the walls that divide us. Thank you for watching. If you found this insight satisfying, please like this video and subscribe to Bible Stories Insights.